Mr. Chairman, I think this is one of the most complex, challenging foreign policy issues of our time. And whenever a power becomes a nuclear power, you can't take it away from them. And we saw that happen in Pakistan and the AQCon network proliferating to Iran, North Korea. I think this is the result of a policy of neglect in prior administrations, both Republican and Democrat, not dealing with North Korea. And now we are in a situation where we are today where I don't see a whole lot of good options on the table. It is a fact that he has this ICBM capability, that he's miniaturized the nuclear warheads. By all accounts, the IC, while maybe not definitive, we think he may have that capability now as well. And talked to the ambassador from Japan the other day, and they are terrified of what the prospects. I don't know how to get rid of this guy. And we talk about regime change, we talk about opening channels, letting people defect, and a lot of different things. We know China is the strongest country to deal with North Korea, and it's in their best interest in their backyard, and yet we're seeing satellite technology, photographs after the UN sanctions was voted on, defying those sanctions, with boats going back and forth between China and North Korea. So that hasn't had a whole lot of impact. So it's been very interesting. I mean, let me commend you for your courage coming here today in light of the dangers and the obvious risks that you're taking. I think you're a courageous individual. But they're almost deified, this dynasty. So how do we change that? First question. Second one is, if the military option is on the table, and Secretary Mattis has warned against it, but if that happened, what would the peninsula look like? What would be the aftermath of the military option?
The first, I think many people do not understand why North Korean regime believe that nuclear weapons can solve their problems, and why Kim Jong-un's regime is so much obsessed with this kind of nuclear weapons program, which can do nothing but all those, sanctions or whatever. But from the perspective of North Korean regime and Kim Jong-un regime, they really, so far, they really believes in that this kind of goal can be achieved. So, for instance, now let's review about a U.S. and ROK military alliance. Let's compare the military alliance between South Korea and America and military alliance between China and North Korea. North Korean regime learned that there are a lot of loopholes in military alliance between South Korea and the America. For instance, in that military alliance treaty, there is no any clause of compulsory involvement in military alliance with South Korea. So if a state of war or any kind of war happens on Korean Peninsula, both sides would discuss. That is the clause. There is no any legal binding. But if you read North Korean military alliance with China, there is a compulsory clause. If war happens on Korean Peninsula, then Chinese side will automatically, naturally involve in this war. And secondly, if we see the military alliance treaty between South Korea and America, there is a kind of a very loose clause, how this treaty go on and how this treaty breaks down. If one party of this treaty say goodbye 1 year in advance, then this military alliance would disappear. That is the present reality. But if you read the North Korean military alliance with China, it's a kind of divorce agreement. If one of the party do not agree to break this treaty, then this treaty would last again and again and again. So I think we have to cover up all those loopholes in military alliance between ROK and America. That's why North Koreans still believe that if they have these nuclear weapons and continue to blackmail, and it can make the strategists in Washington to think whether America is ready to sacrifice at least with one of their cities in America in return for protecting the whole South Korean territory. And they strongly believe to do that because they learned from the history about the lessons of Atchison Line. In January of 1950, then the Secretary of State Atchison drew that Atchison Line. Actually, that is the line of defense between South Korea and Japan. So at that time, America did not include South Korea as their own sphere of protection. That prompted the decision of Korean War by Stalin and Kim Il-sung. Why? Because Soviet Union succeeded in nuclear tests in August of 1949. And after this success of nuclear test by Soviet Union, the strategists in Washington thought that how to prevent any kind of accidental nuclear war with Soviet Union. So they decided to draw a red line of defense, and unfortunately, they draw that red line not on 38th parallel, but the place on the sea between South Korea and Japan. So from these precedents of Vietnam case, Korean War case, even Chinese case, because Chinese Communist Party also succeeded in driving American forces out from Taiwan in 1979 by completing its ICBM program. So from these precedents and history, North Korean communists learned that once they acquired this technology and means to attack America, and if they continue to blackmail until America and Washington accepts their deal, they can prevail on this game. That is the strong belief. And the second thing about the question about military, the option, of course, I strongly believe that if there is any preventive or surgical strike or whatever, I think the war will be won by America and South Korea. There is no doubt about it. But we have to see the human sacrifice from this military option. Now, there are tens of thousands of North Korean artilleries and short-range missiles are ready to fire at any moment along the military demarcation line. And North Korean officers are trained to press the button without any further instructions from the general command if something happens on their side. Wow. So if there is any sound of fire or bomb or strike from Americans, the military artilleries and short-range missiles will fire against South Korea. And we have to remember that tens of millions of South Korean populations are living 70 to 80 kilometers away from this military demarcation line. Very short distance of range of fire. And it will, nobody can calculate, but I think certain human sacrifice would happen because of this military option. So as I've said, there are tremendous changes are taking place inside North Korea in spite of this reign of terror by Kim Jong-un regime. If we are determined to use and expand our soft power, I think one day we can reach the same goal we achieved with former Soviet Union and those former East European socialist countries.
Very insightful.
Representative Tulsi